Yeah, sure, Vikings. You may have won the NFC North this year, but are you on Santa's nice list? No. Grossi. So stupid. Grossi Bossy Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to do Packers time, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom.
Ho, 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 mother lovers.
Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and predicting each game in NFL Week 16. Folks, it's that time of the year. Saturday, we got a full slate of games on Christmas Eve, and Sunday on Christmas, you got the Green Bay mother-loving Packers and two other games being played. And so, we're gonna break them all down, and we're gonna be festive while we do it, damn it. Last week, I won a respectable 13-3. Here's where I went wrong, and here's where I went right. That brings me to 139-83 on the year. Not too shabby, hoping not to hit 100 wrong this year, but we'll see how that goes. Starting off with a Thursday night game, which in the beginning of the year I would have been like, this was hot trash, but now it might be warm trash. You got the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the New York Jets. Both of these teams in the AFC fighting for playoff spots. The Jaguars had a big comeback win against the Dallas Cowboys last week. They were down 17, wound up getting a pick six in overtime and sealing the win against Dak Prescott and dem boys. And Jaguars, listen, they might be peaking at the right time. Trevor Lawrence has been playing incredibly well these past few weeks. Zay Jones had 3 touchdowns against that Cowboys defense. Travis Etienne running all over them, and things are kind of clicking on the offense. The defense, not so good, but the Jaguars, they might be like fun to watch right now, which is strange. Meanwhile, the Jets, the Jets. Zach Wilson starting last week because Mike White has fractured ribs. Mike White will not be starting again this Thursday, and so that is going to hurt them. And while the Jets do have a very good defense, they also allowed a touchdown on 4th and inches against the Detroit Lions, so everybody has a breaking point, and their offensive line is just not good. They're dealing, obviously, with a ton of injuries, but offensive line is going to be one of their priorities heading into this offseason, if it's not QB as well. But right now, I have to go with the hot hand with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Right now, the Titans are collapsing, and the Jaguars, they might wind up stealing the division. They have a Week 18 showdown with the Titans, so that should be a lot of fun. That might be for the division and a playoff spot. So for right now, the Spotted Kitty continues to meow. Following that, you got a Christmas Eve game. You got the Bills versus the Bears. The Bills, listen, they dealt with treacherous weather last week in defeating the Miami Dolphins. It was cold, it was snowing, there were snowballs everywhere. But this week, oh boy, it's supposed to get even frackin' colder. The Bills, big win over the Dolphins. Josh Allen was basically perfect on the night. Meanwhile, the Bears put up a really good fight against the Philadelphia Eagles. Their defensive line was getting after Jalen Hurts, so much so that unfortunately Jalen Hurts got injured. But the Bears, unfortunately, unable to capitalize, and they lost. And listen, the Bears, they may suck this year, but Justin Fields,
the boy's good, no doubts there, huh?
He is their guy. He's that franchise QB, and as I've said since the beginning of the year, that was the goal. Any wins are just a cherry on top of the cake, because heading into this offseason, they have a lot of draft capital, early picks, and a ton of money, the most out of any in the league with their salary cap, so they're going to be able to get whatever free agents they want and get a dynamic player or trade down to get even more draft capital. But here, I think the Buffalo Bills should be able to punch their ticket, win the AFC East. They already clinched a playoff spot, and I think the Bills will just continue to roll. Following that, you got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Cleveland Browns. Both of these teams coming off a big win of the Saints defeating the Atlanta Falcons and staying alive to win the division title in the NFC South, which is embarrassing. The NFC South is just very, 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 did I mention very bad? So Saints the only team to win in the NFC South last week, and the Buccaneers are trying to gift wrap the division to somebody else, anybody else, and just nobody is taking it. Meanwhile, I got the Cleveland Browns in the ugliest game on Saturday, defeating the Baltimore Ravens. That defense, while Joe Woods does need to get fired, they're no match for the terrible offense that Greg Roman brings to the plate. And while the Browns, their playoff aspirations are pretty low, who knows? Maybe they could go on a little bit of a run. I do kind of need them to beat the Washington Commanders, but I refuse to root for Deshaun Watson. So here, it actually could wind up being a pretty solid game. The Saints, depending on which team shows up, can have a high-flying offense when they actually decide to give it to Alvin Kamara, but they definitely have some playmakers. The defense depends on which week it is, but I actually am going to pick the Saints here. I think they're just a little bit more of a complete team. Andy Dalton, maybe he comes out and surprises some people a little bit this week. So I'm going to go with the Saints, but honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if either of these teams win.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
Following that, you got the Houston Texans taking on the Tennessee Titans. Both of these teams losing heartbreakers last week. The Texans bringing the Chiefs into overtime, which was a bit surprising. And I gotta tip my hat to the Houston Texans, because these past few weeks, they've been playing pretty darn good football. No, they're not winning, but they're going toe-to-toe with teams and kind of bringing them down to the very end. They did it with the Cowboys, they did it in the first half of the Eagles game, and now they just did it with the Kansas City Chiefs. Meanwhile, the Titans, as we talked about, they are collapsing and collapsing fast. That offense is pitiful. They lead the league in 3-and-outs. Todd Downing, yikes. Yeah, it's just awful all around. And it's going to be cold, so I think you're going to have to utilize the run game. Derrick Henry has not been as much of a factor as we thought he would be this season, and I think a lot of that has to do with Todd Downing. So you know what? Here's Tom's bold upset of the week. I'm going to pick the Houston Texans to defeat the Tennessee Titans at home in Nashville, just because I don't believe in the Titans right now. And listen, the Texans, they're not really that great either, but I think just in terms of momentum, the Texans have some and the Titans have none. They've lost 4 straight. So because of that, I'm going to pick the Texans to win.
We're hoping for a friggin' Christmas miracle.
Then you got the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Seahawks getting absolutely stomped on Thursday Night Football by the San Francisco 49ers, but don't feel bad. They're kind of doing that to everybody. And the Seahawks season has basically fallen apart at this point. Geno Smith still playing pretty solid, but they can't establish the run, which is being problematic. Their defense is not good. And, you know, they overachieved this year. They really don't have anything to really complain about too much because, listen, they still got the Broncos pick, which is probably going to be a top 5 pick, so that's pretty solid. But the Seahawks are still in contention for a playoff spot, but they need to win these next few games, and it's going to be tough against the Kansas City Chiefs. Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, they won against the Texans, so they're just going to pretend everything is fine.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
But I don't know if everything is fine. You have some turnovers that have happened these past few weeks, whether it's Patrick Mahomes and some bad interceptions that keep teams in games, looking at the Broncos game, or you have some fumbles that were really not great against the Houston Texans. And the Chiefs, I still think, are a very good football team. That offense is still very dynamic, but there's definitely some concerns heading into the playoffs. This should be a winnable game, but last week was a very, very winnable game. I do have the Chiefs pulling off the victory in Arrowhead against a struggling Seahawks team, but I don't know how much momentum they're going to have heading into the postseason. Then you got the New York Giants taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Well, the Giants didn't blow it in primetime, and the Vikings had the largest comeback in history.
You did it! Congratulations!
So happy for you both. The Giants avoiding a tie with the Washington Commanders on Sunday Night Football. This really helps their playoff aspirations as they are in the driver's seat to claim a spot, and they could clinch a spot this week. Now, this is going to be a tough order against the Minnesota Vikings, who somehow, someway, have cast a spell over the NFL in which their opponents are either collapsing, making boneheaded mistakes, and they keep on getting away with it every single week. I do feel like it's the Breaking Bad meme every week, but it's Christmas this week, so maybe Jesse has a Santa hat on to make it a little bit different and we're not repeating ourselves. But the Vikings making the biggest comeback in NFL history against the Indianapolis Colts. They were down 33-0 at half, and then everything just went their way, unless you were talking about the referees, because the refs really were trying to make the Vikings lose. Totally didn't send any Venmo payments to the refs that game. Almost as bad as an investment as I did in crypto. But this could be a pretty competitive game. The Giants basically have their practice squad out there, and the Vikings, I mean, hey, they could still compete for the number 1 seed, though the Eagles do have a game ahead of them, and also the Eagles beat the Vikings. But I'm going to pick the Vikings to get the win here because Santa is not giving me what I want this year, and that's for the Vikings to collapse, so nobody gets any presents this year.
He's an angry elf.
Following that, you got the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the New England Patriots. The Bengals, the Buccaneers had them in the first half, but not after that. The Bengals roaring back in the second half. Joe Burrow playing fantastic. The defense forcing 4 turnovers there, a bunch on one Tom Brady, and they took care of business in that second half, defeating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are in now sole possession of the AFC North. They're in good spot to potentially win that division. It's not going to happen this week, but they're in the driver's seat. Meanwhile, the Patriots, you know what you did. Bill Belichick basically sitting there on the sideline going,
Wait a minute. How did this happen? We're smarter than this.
apparently not. Because, oh boy, what a disaster. An ugly game against the Raiders, but just topped off with going into overtime, but instead running one more play, and Jacoby Myers goes, oh wait, Mac Jones is open, throws it across the field, and Chandler Jones, he stiff arms Mac Jones into the shadow realm, returns it for a touchdown. Patriots lose. And the world rejoiced a little bit. But yeah, an embarrassing loss for the Patriots, which may wind up keeping them out of the playoffs because this is a very tough game against a very good Bengals team. The Bengals have won 6 straight games and show no signs of slowing down. I see them getting the win here and getting one step closer to winning the North. And so, kitty goes meow. Then you got a battle of the kitty cats. You got the Detroit Lions taking on the Carolina Panthers. The Lions, they started 1-6 and now they're 7-7. They're almost in control of their own destiny, but the Lions are getting closer and closer to that playoff spot. And listen, if it can't be the Packers, if the Lions get it at number 7 and the Vikings keep the number 2 spot and the Lions eliminate the Vikings in the wild card round, well, that would just be the best damn Christmas I ever had. It was not a pretty game for the Lions going up against a really good defense of the Jets. And for a while, Zach Wilson actually looked competent, which is basically the worst insult you can give to the Lions defense. But the Lions were able to squeak away a win, and that's all that matters. Meanwhile, the Panthers had an opportunity to be the leader in the NFC South last week, but they said, no, I don't think I will. So the Panthers, I don't know if they're tanking. I don't know if they're going to win the division. I think that this is a tough game for them. The Detroit Lions should be able to win. While I do think the Panthers have a solid defense and when they establish the run can be a pretty darn good offense, I think the Lions are just going to have too much firepower here. So because of that, Lions win. Following that, you got a battle of the birds right after the Cats. You got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Baltimore Ravens.
Bird up.
Both of these teams flying into a brick wall last week as the Falcons, while they started Desmond Ridder, and he didn't look too bad. He protected the ball. The Falcons, they've had so many late game turnovers this season, I've lost count, and unfortunately losing to the Saints. Meanwhile, the Ravens couldn't get anything going against the Cleveland Browns. That offense is pitiful. Greg Roman not doing a great job. However, Lamar Jackson could be returning this week, and that could give them a big boost on offense just because he's such a dynamic playmaker. If they establish the run, which they should be able to do against the Atlanta Falcons, maybe that offense will have a little bit more life in him. Right now, the Ravens are still in the playoffs. However, let's see how these next few weeks go. I think they'll be able to beat the Falcons here and get one step closer to dragging Greg Roman into the playoffs.
The worst show on television.
Following that, you got the Washington Commanders taking on the San Francisco 49ers. The Commanders, rough break. While the Giants were trying to give him a hug in the end zone, and not the nice kind, but the defensive pass interference kind, they unfortunately were unable to capitalize and either tie or defeat the New York Giants on Sunday Night Football, but they still hold a playoff spot in the NFC for now. Meanwhile, the 49ers, 7 straight in a row. Right now, that's the longest active record in the NFL this season, and the 49ers are just rolling on all cylinders. Their defense is absolutely disgustingly good. They're number one in just about every category that matters. Their offense has so many playmakers and superstars, and Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, well, he's pretty damn relevant right now. Unfortunately, I need the Commanders to lose to give the Packers a slight playoff shot, but homerism aside, I think the 49ers are just one of the best teams in football. They're going to prove it again this week and defeat the Washington Commanders. Then you have a highly anticipated game that has been so deflated you would have thought it was a Tom Brady football. You got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Why is it deflated? Well, the Eagles coming off a win against the Bears, unfortunately losing Jalen Hurts likely for this week as he has a messed up shoulder. They're likely to sit him, and honestly, it just makes a lot of sense because the Eagles can't lose the number 1 seed this week while they do need just one more win to clinch the division. I don't think that's going to happen potentially this week, though never count out Gardner Minshew. But the Eagles really have no incentive to play Jalen Hurts in this game because why risk him for their playoff run? Meanwhile, the Cowboys losing to the Jaguars because it just seems that every single time Mike McCarthy faces an opponent that starts to gain momentum, McCarthy just does this.
I give up.
But the Cowboys, they can't win the division this week. They can't really improve their playoff standings, so this game has kind of gotten a bit meaningless. The Cowboys, of course, are going to want to win, and it's ironic considering the fact that you had the Cowboys lose to the Eagles earlier this season when they had a backup in, and now the Cowboys might beat the Eagles when they have a backup QB in. But either way, this game has definitely lost a bunch of momentum. I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win simply because Jalen Hurts is not playing, but don't be surprised if the Eagles' backup, Gardner Minshew, gets the job done too. Following that, you got the Saturday night football game. You got the Raiders and the Steelers. Who the hell made this a primetime game? The Raiders coming off a miraculous win in which Santa and the Patriots and Jacoby Myers just gifted them the win, in which it was just an ugly football game all around. Meanwhile, the Steelers, in probably one of the games that nobody cared about the most last week, taking on the Panthers and defeating them. And the Steelers, listen, they have that good defense. They're keeping their slight playoff hopes alive. And I'm actually going to pick the Steelers to win this game simply because I think the Steelers will be able to stop Josh Jacobs. And yes, they still have to worry about guys like Devontae Adams and Waller, but I think the Steelers will do enough on that defense to contain them. I think TJ Watt might have a field day against Derek Carr. And while Max Crosby could cause some problems for the Steelers, he was kind of kept in check last week. So I'm actually going to pick the Steelers to get the W here. And maybe one of these teams will make the playoffs. But to be honest, I don't know if either of them deserve it. Then on Christmas Day, the first of 3 games, you got the Green Bay mother-loving Packers taking on the Miami Dolphins. The Packers! We're on a win streak, baby! The first time since week 3 when we won back-to-back games. We did it. It's week 16, but we did it. Defeating the LA Rams at home on Monday Night Football. This is the last away game for the Green Bay Packers, and they are somehow, some way, still in that playoff hunt. Though it's unlikely, and we're about to face our toughest test in the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins seem to get their mojo back a bit against the Bills. Raheem Mostert running all over the Buffalo Bills. Jalen Waddle having a big game. And they looked pretty good. Now, they have lost 3 straight, but honestly, they might get their rebound game against the Packers. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua, and of course, Raheem Mostert. This could be a tough game for the Packers because the Packers, listen, they can't win the division like they always do. Like they always did.
Before the dark times, before the empire.
The Vikings. But the Packers, if they're going to win, they are going to have to play basically flawless football. The one thing they can take advantage of is the bad defense of the Miami Dolphins. A.J. Dillon left the game early on Monday night, but he cleared concussion protocol, so he should be good to go on Christmas Day against the Dolphins. And the Packers, with Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson on the field, they have a shot here. It's small, but they have a shot. The defense, of course, is my biggest concern. That secondary going up against Waddle and Hill is going to give me nightmares. Joe Barry gives me them on a constant basis. But because I'm a homer and I will never pick against them, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers with the upset. Maybe they're going to be able to keep Tua's offense off the field just enough. And please, just lose this game. Please. No, we suck in Florida. Please. It's Christmas. Then to torture everybody on Christmas Day, you got the Denver Broncos taking on the LA Rams. Hey, the Broncos! They won!
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
They scored points and everything. Yeah, it was against like a backup QB with the Cardinals, but hey, it counts. The Broncos getting a dub, ripping it out there, and yeah. Why are you guys playing on Christmas?
Got invited to the Christmas party by mistake. Who knew?
Meanwhile, the Rams, oh boy. Yeah, that Super Bowl hangover. I'm sorry. You guys still haven't woken up from it. The Rams officially eliminated from the playoffs after losing to the Packers on Monday Night Football, and it's just ugly. The Broncos defense, I think, will be able to have a field day against Baker Mayfield, so I'm actually going to have the Broncos win yet another game here. Though I think the only person watching this game might be Brandon Perna. So, Merry Christmas, Brandon. And I'm so sorry. Then the Sunday Night Football game, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Cardinals. Ugh. Both teams losing last week. Tom Brady.
It's ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself.
Looked really good in the first half, and then whatever the hell the second half was, losing to the Cincinnati Bengals in embarrassing fashion. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, yeah, they're beat up. The fans are just waiting to fire Cliff Kingsbury, and there's just no hope this year. And playing a deep backup against the Bucs, I mean, hell, they actually might wind up beating the Bucs, but this could get ugly really, really quick. If the Buccaneers defense that showed up in the first half shows up for the whole game against the Cardinals, this could be a massacre. I'm just going to pray that this game is over quickly. I think the Buccaneers win, but it's not going to be very festive.
A Festivus for the rest of us.
And finally, on Monday Night Football, you got the LA Chargers taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The Chargers getting a big win, currently in the driver's seat to make the playoffs, which they're going to get healthier. Derwin James, Joey Bosa going to be coming back. That will definitely help. But their offense is just weird. They have the dynamic playmakers, and you kind of just have to look at their offensive coordinator and head coach and scratch your head going, why aren't they clicking more? Also, could be because their offensive line is absolutely decimated. Meanwhile, you got the Colts. Do I really need to say anything at this point that hasn't been said? Blew a 33-point lead. Matt Ryan reminding everyone why 28-3 happened.
It's an older code, sir, but it checks out.
The Colts deciding to go a different direction at QB and will be starting Nick Foles instead of Matt Ryan. I think the Chargers are going to win on Monday night because they just have a little bit more momentum here. I think they're the better team, and I just do not trust the Colts with any lead at this point. Both teams might choke it away, and you might wind up with a tie, but I'm going to go with the Chargers, and yeah, these are bad primetime games. But those are my picks for Week 16. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And folks, after this week, we just got 2 more weeks in the regular season, and then it's playoffs. But let me know. You guys find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. Happy holidays. And as always, go Pack Go.